room. I am very excited about today's topic. We are going to be talking about nonprofits, and I am excited about our guest today. So I need you to come in. Don't just come in the room, but do me a favor and make sure that you share this with someone, tag someone. There's going to be a lot of information that I believe is going to be a blessing to you. So don't just come just to watch, but I want you to come with any questions that you may have. I want you to come with your notepads ready to take notes, because there's going to be a lot, I believe, that is going to bless you on tonight. So let me give you an opportunity to come on in the room. As you come in, do me a favor, get in the comment section. Let me know that you are here, and we are getting ready to have an awesome conversation on this evening. Now, I'm getting ready to do what I'm telling you to do. I'm getting ready to share this so that people know that we are live. I see you, Christ Community Church. You all are coming in. Whether you're on the Christ Community page, or you're on my personal page, or you are on YouTube, I just want to welcome you. Siobhan, I see you in the comment section. So good to have you. And we are grateful to God on this evening. So look, I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time warming up, because I want to get right to the information. Because I tell you all the time, whenever I have these conversations, I'm learning as you are learning. And I believe this season that we are in, God has created an opportunity that is perfect for us to learn. And you know, I've been telling you, we've got to maximize this moment. I know we're in a space that we don't necessarily want to be in. This season has been inconvenient, but it's still an opportunity. And I always share that Mexican proverb with you that says, they thought that I was buried, but they didn't realize I was a seed. That sometimes it's a matter of perspective. One person can see and feel that they're buried. Another person knows who they are and knows that God can use the nutrients in the dirt, and God can grow you, shape you, and develop you for the season that He is preparing you for. So come on in the room and let's get the conversation started. And without further ado, I want to thank God for our guest on today, Dr. Wesley Proctor, who we are so excited to have. Dr. Proctor, you are on the screen now, sir. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful to have you. Everybody that I seem to talk to in Philadelphia seems to know you or know of you. And so, man, it is just a treat for me to just have this conversation. Dr. Proctor, welcome to the show on this evening.
Oh, bless you, man of God, and bless all the listeners tonight. I'm just so grateful to be here and to be a blessing to you, and hopefully be able to answer some of your questions around nonprofits. So thank you for having me, sir.
Yes, sir. Dr. Proctor, why don't we start here? Just help us out. Just give us a little bit of background about yourself. Let us know who you are, some of your experience, some of the things that you've gone through and you've done up to this point.
So, like you said, man of God, my name is Dr. Wesley Proctor. I wear a number of hats. I am the youth pastor and executive administrator of Victory Christian Center, Philadelphia, where my pastor is Apostle Jim J. Ellis III. I've been a youth pastor for 16 years. Been the administrator for 22 years. I also recently got an appointment to serve as assistant teaching professor at Villanova University, where I teach nonprofit management, human capital management, strategic planning. My academic work is University of Delaware, Temple, and where I did my research and PhD work at the University of Pennsylvania, where I looked at student retention at predominantly white schools. I also formed my own nonprofit organization called Wesley Proctor Ministries, where we help organizations obtain their 501c3 status from the IRS. And I'm so grateful and blessed to even know that I've been able to help over 1,000 organizations achieve, and one of them is your wife, man of God.
Yes, sir.
Achieve their 501c3 designation from the IRS. I'm grateful to say I've never had a client that was rejected or denied. As a matter of fact, I've even helped clients who lost their status to get it reinstated. but I have been in this space. I love talking about nonprofit work, and I just signed on to a deal to have my own radio show.
Yeah.
Yes, it's going to be based in Baltimore, but I am going to be talking about nonprofits and profiling some of the work my clients have done throughout my 20 plus years of setting up nonprofit organizations. So I'm very grateful to God for the path He's taken me on, and I'm very grateful to be here tonight. Oh, and I wanted to mention one last thing. Like your wife, when organizations retain us to do their nonprofit work, that money goes towards our inner city kids here in Philadelphia to get book money to go on to college. So I have a program called the James William Proctor Book Award. My brother was tragically murdered in my senior year of high school. So I formed the James William Proctor Book Award. And in exchange for us being able to raise funds, helping other organizations obtain their status, whether they're churches, whether they're mentoring groups. We charge a retainer fee, and then that retainer fee, we use those funds to give kids book money for college, and we're getting ready to enter into our 14th year.
Oh my goodness, that is a blessing. I certainly want to commend you for that work, and it's just a testimony of how God can take a tragedy and so many lives can be blessed through it, and so
Yes.
yeah, I certainly want to commend you for that. As we move forward, I want to just ask you this, but before we even get into nonprofit stuff, man, how are you doing? I know we're in this COVID-19 season, and so many of our lives have been interrupted. So let me just ask you how you doing? What's going on with you right now?
So I just finished my first year as an assistant teaching professor at Villanova. I had three classes to teach, and when the COVID hit, I was teaching on campus, so they converted all of my classes online. So I had three classes online, and then my sister is an OR nurse. So my
Mm.
sister lives with my mother, and my mother had major back surgery a while ago, and she's been kind of on the mend to recovery. So my sister has been caring for her, but and living with her, but I also try to take the load off of her so it's not all on her because she's not my mother's only child.
Right.
So balancing the three classes, relieving my sister, caring for my mom, that has been a challenge, but I wouldn't trade it because you only get one mother,
Yes,
and
sir.
I love mine to the
Yes, sir.
moon.
I
So
know
call
that's
me a
right.
mama's boy, talk about me, but I would not be the man that I am, and I wouldn't have the blessings that I have if it wasn't for the honor and respect that I show my mother. So, you
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
I'm day by day. It's a day by day thing, but I'm grateful.
Yes, sir, man. Man, praise God. Definitely praying that God would continue to give you strength as you navigate this season.
Thank you, sir.
And once again, I just want to thank you for taking time to join us today. I want to welcome all of our new listeners. Again, this is Pastor Daryl Cook. This is the Doing Life broadcast, and we're so excited to be talking about handling your business, and we're talking about nonprofits on today. And we have a professional in the house, in Dr. Wesley Proctor, who was going to help us to really walk through this, and we'll be talking about things that I think everybody needs to know by way of nonprofit. So, Dr. Proctor, I want to start here because we keep throwing around, terms like nonprofit organization. We talk about 501c3, and some people hear that and they don't know what it is. So, can we just start just by defining terms and really help people understand what nonprofit work is?
Sure, absolutely. So a lot of people have a misconception that the term nonprofit means you can't make a profit. That is, I just want to dispel that right now. That is not what it means. You have a lot of nonprofit organizations making millions and millions of dollars. Colleges and universities are nonprofits, most of them. Your hospitals are nonprofits. So that if I can't tell you anything else, you can clearly know from those examples that they make plenty of money,
Right.
and they are 501c3. So the term nonprofit essentially means that your mission and services that you provide are more important than individuals personally benefiting from the organization. So in other words, if I have an organization that I set up and I'm mentoring kids, and we bring in $1 million from that mission, then the organization is clear that when they have a 501c3 status, that that money must go back into the mission of the organization before it benefits any individual, because the organization is set up to benefit and to push the mission first, not to benefit the individual. So if it came to a time where we had to cut salaries or fund this program, we're going to fund the program because the program is tied to the mission. Does that mean you can't make a salary? Absolutely not. But the main thrust of having a 501c3 designation from the IRS is that if you were to step away from it, the mission will still go on. The mission and the legacy of the organization will go on. And the IRS gives you that exemption, which is federal, to say, in exchange, that you do not have to pay corporate income tax on the revenue that the organization brings in. So if I'm charging you money for programs and services, it's supposed to be for the mission. If I get a grant, it's for the mission. If someone gives our organization money for a program, it's for the mission. So all of those three examples of revenue, typically, if you're a for-profit, you would be taxed for. It would be called corporate income tax. That money would be taxed before you spend it. The IRS says, because of your mission, we're going to exempt your organization from ever having to pay taxes on any of the money it brings in, because we want you to put that money back into the mission to further it. So that's why that 501c3 designation is bestowed upon an organization, because the IRS wants them not to have an excuse to further its mission.
Yeah,
I hope I answered that clearly.
Yeah, no, that was very clear. That was very clear, and I think that really helped a lot of people, because so many people think that nobody's making money, or there is no money moving through the organization. And so when you like made that connection between hospitals and some other organizations where you know that there's major money,
Yeah, Villanova, the school I work for as a professor, is a 501c3, and they got over a $700 million endowment. So that clearly tells you,
right.
That, the 501c3 is a powerful tool if you leverage it properly. And if man of God, if you permit me to say,
yes, sir,
there are major benefits with it. Number one, people give to it, and they get to write off what they give to the nonprofit, the 501c3, personally, because it counts as a tax deduction to the donor. Not just in money, but property, any other assets that the individual companies have. That 501c3 organization gives that donor the right to write it off as a tax deduction. You get to apply for grants, which is money you don't have to pay back. You also get the state sales tax exemption. So when you go out and shop and buy stuff for the nonprofit, you're clearly able to just pay at cost for those items and not have to pay sales tax. Finally, there's the property tax exemption. I'm just giving you a few examples, but
that's great.
The property tax exemption. So if the nonprofit organization acquires building or land in that nonprofit's name, for example, my organization was given a building by Wells Fargo Bank. Wells Fargo Bank had this program where they take properties that weren't being used or foreclosed or whatever, and they offered it to the nonprofit organization. We were blessed to be one of the recipients, and I'm naming the building after my mother, which is going to be the Catherine Proctor Community Center. So we were able to go back to the city to apply for what's called a property tax exemption. Because we own the building outright with no mortgage, and we have a 501c3, we're able to take advantage of the property tax exemption, meaning that we can apply for exemption for property tax on that building as long as we own it, as long as we're using it for nonprofit purposes. So we were granted the exemption, and all the tax money that we paid into the building prior to us having the exemption, we were able to petition and get it all back. So The benefits are just endless because they're trying to preserve and make society better in some way. And that's all connected to the mission of the organization. And that's why they bestow that 501c3 status on organizations. So I
Yeah.
hope that helps.
Yeah, very much so. But very much so, and I think that's a blessing to a lot of people who were kind of confused in a lot of ways. Let me ask you this, because I hear a lot of people talking about, starting a nonprofit. Some people have already started, but there's some issues that they run into. I want to know, especially for those who are considering, from your perch, what are some issues that people have, some problems that people face as they either consider it or they're already into it and they're running into some things they hadn't considered beforehand? What are some issues or even some red flags that we need to pay attention to?
Ooh. I think the number one issue is trying to discern or decide whether or not I want to make the organization a nonprofit or a for profit. That's one of the major issues that I come up with a lot. Daycare centers is a great example, if you permit me.
Yes, sir.
So daycare centers could be either nonprofit or for profit, but it depends on the person who's setting it up, their preference. So if you like control and you love the sense of owning it yourself and you don't have to answer to a board, then I would recommend you making it for profit because you would own it. You would be the shot caller. You would be the boss. Um, but the downside is, because there's a downside to both sides. The downside of that is that for profit is going to be subject to corporate income tax. So all that CCIS money, all that private pay money, all that grant money is considered corporate income. So whether you get a $500,000 in that year and you're left with a quarter by December 31st, the IRS is going to tax you on that $500,000, whether you have it or not, because you took it in. So if you don't have that money at the end of the year to pay those taxes corporately, you're going to be in trouble. But you can take that same concept and make it into a nonprofit where if you don't care about the control and you're more concerned about the mission and really servicing the kids, then you would answer to a board of people, even though you would be over the board. You would answer to a board of people, but you wouldn't be subject to corporate income tax. So that $500,000 story, you wouldn't have to pay taxes on it. But you would have to report out to the IRS how you spent the money, but it wouldn't be subject to taxes. So the nonprofit and for-profit struggle I see often because certain issues you do need to be for-profit in and certain issues you need to be nonprofit in. Another major issue is the name. I see this a lot, specifically with my people of faith, our Christians, our fellow believers, when they want to reach the world and they want everybody to know that they saved, especially with the community side. If it's a church, it's fine. Have Jesus, have the love of Christ, have all that in your name. But when you're talking about reaching the community and making all people feel inclusive and servicing everyone, you have to be careful here because you may need to make things general enough so it doesn't limit you in your scope of service. Good example, Wesley Proctor Ministries. When you hear Wesley Proctor Ministries, you think of us as a church or a ministry. And we're neither. We're a ministry, but I do more book award giveaways, book bag giveaways, workshops, seminars. We have this community center. So we're more educationally focused. But when we go after certain grants, because I have ministries in the name, they automatically think we're religious and we're locked out of the glass ceiling of applying for that grant because they're going by our name. So that's something to consider. You don't want to leave your name so specific that it limits you to the point where 10 years from now, you start an organization called Girls Going Global and you want to pick up boys. 5 years from now, you already called it Girls Going Global. So everybody who sees your name is going to think you're a girls group. So all of those things you have to think about. You have to be visionary focused because 10 years from now, your perception, your direction, the organization's direction is going to be totally different than it is when you first set it up. The last piece of advice I would give is that it's good to set it up when you don't have anything. When everything is a concept or ideal on paper, don't believe the myth that you have to have something going to get your 501c3. I'd rather you not have anything going and it's just an ideal or proposal on paper than for you to do it and then we have to backpedal and change some things because it's not done right. So it's best to have the ideas, the proposed programming, the services you want to provide. It's like all a dream first. So nothing has been a reality yet. It's easier to do versus you going out and trying to do it on your own and then you don't have the paperwork in order. So I would encourage you to do it on this end. Have your paperwork in order first before you go out and launch any programs or services. Why? Because you don't want to meet a major donor who loves your concept and they want to give to it. But because you don't have your paperwork in order, you can't accept that gift.
Yeah.
So those are the major things I ran into. I had a client who was up for a grant for the Eagles, $10,000 grant. Didn't realize they lost their 501c3 status. So the Eagles notified them and said, hey, we can't give you this money because you don't have your 501c3. So he had to come to me. I had to get it reinstated. And by the time we got it reinstated, it was too late. He already lost the grant and the grant cycle had ended. But the main thing is he had his 501c3, but had no clue that it was lost. So one of the major ways you lose your 501c3 is because you don't file your annual 990 for 3 consecutive years in a row. So the only entities that are exempt from filing this 990 are religious organizations, churches, mosques, places, 501c3s that have a religious place of worship and they're providing religious services on a continual basis. So if you don't fit that category, see, Wesley Proctor Ministries don't fit that category, but a church would. So they're exempt from filing a 990 and it will show on their 501c3 approval letter. But all the rest of us have to file our 501c3 letter. So, I mean, our 990 each year. And then the 990 is filed based on the revenue, the corporate income that that organization brings in for that fiscal year. So, you know, it's so much to it. And then I just want to say this one point, man. Yep. So then when you get the 501c3 status, you're either classified as a public charity or a private foundation. Just because you have foundation in your name doesn't make you a private foundation. You can be a public charity. So a public charity or organization is just what it is, just with how it sounds. You're providing something charitable to the public and it's open to the public in some way. A private foundation is when you raise money and you give it away to other 501c3 organizations whose mission is connected to why you raised the money. So like Walmart Foundation, I'll use them as a good example. They are a private foundation. You notice they don't do any programming. You don't hear about them providing any services. All they do is receive other organizations who are doing things, and then they review what they're doing. And if it matches their mission on why they collected this money, they award the organization that money. Once they award the organization the money, it's up to that organization to provide those services and report back to the foundation. So the private foundations do absolutely no programming. Majority, 98% of it is just raising money and giving it away. Hope that makes sense.
Very much so. Very much.
Okay.
I want to swing back to something you were talking about when you were using the example of the daycare, whether they wanted to be for profit or nonprofit, and part of that depended upon how much control that they wanted to have. And one of the conversations that I see buzzing about quite a bit with people who are talking about starting a nonprofit is a conversation around selection of their board. Can you give me some insight on how we should be thinking about that, because some people just want to just select people who will say yes to everything, right? They
Right.
won't there won't be any resistance or anything of that nature. But I want to know from you, what should we be looking at when it comes to selection of our boards?
One of the major pitfalls that I see is our organization selecting board members that are all family. The
Mm,
IRS frowns on that.
yeah.
They do not want you to have, like, it wouldn't be good for myself to be on the board, my mother and my sister, all three of us, and then we're the only three people on the board,
Yeah.
because it's not a good um, balance of the mission you're trying to target. So if we're saying we're giving our book awards to needy high school students, then our voices shouldn't be the only voice on the board. Because when you're thinking about a board in its broader context, you're thinking about people who bring resources to the organization, and that's going to
That's
help
good.
move the mission in some way. So there's a few things here. So you want people with resources, whether it's financial, whether it's knowing other people, whether it's getting you a venue. They need to be able to bring something to the table. But the IRS also looks at this individual or these individuals as the trusted people who are the face of the organization, and that's going to help move this mission to the next level of where it needs to go. So they need to bring some kind of skill set or resource to the organization. The other thing is, when it comes to board members, you need to have some board people that's going to show up.
Yeah.
That you're just not going to have them in name only because they're the CEO of Exxon, or they're the mayor of the city. I'm just using these titles as an example. But then when you have board meetings and stuff, they never show up, and then the other board members are there, but notice that this board member doesn't show up.
Yeah.
So if you're going to make the expectations, you know, there, you need to make them consistent among all the board members, because then you're going to have board members looking, raising their eyebrows, saying, "How come this board member is not here? Why aren't they doing work?" Yada yada yada. And then it strains the board when other people aren't as committed to the organization as they need to be. So I see that a lot too. Oh, I'll just put my boo on here that I grew up with. Well, brother ain't got no skills.
Yeah.
He's not bringing anything to the organization. And I hate to be this way, but you got to remember that the organization is serving the public.
Yeah.
So these individuals are going to be the face of the organization when you turn your back.
Mm-hmm.
So remember, because it's not about an individual, it's about the mission.
Yeah.
So are these individuals that you form together competent and capable enough to steer this organization in the direction it needs to go if you're not present?
Yeah.
That's the way you have to really look at it. And if you're okay with having a board set up and you being over the board, I always say have an odd number of board people, because an odd number, if you have a split in the vote, the person who's over the board can make the final decision.
Yeah.
So if I say yes, you say no, and then that third person say, "Okay, I heard both sides, but I'm going to go this way." So they would break the vote. Conflict of interest is another major area.
Yeah.
Conflict of interest meaning that if I have my own clothing line and we're running a camp, and I want the organization to use my clothing line to give to the kids for the camp, come on, buddy, you
Yeah.
can't vote on that.
Right.
You got to recuse yourself and let the rest of the board vote. And you can't take it personal if we don't select your apparel.
Yeah.
So you have friendship, you have relationships, you have all that mixed in it. But oftentimes when we form these boards, we're forming them out of friendship and relationship and not out of being mission driven. And it slows down the momentum of the organization because we're more relationship focused among our board members and not mission minded. So that those individuals need to be able to separate you as the friend to you as the leader.
Yeah.
And it takes a very mature person to be able to make that separation and to see you in that capacity. When we get finished having a board meeting, I'm going to be Wesley. But if I'm the president of this board, I'm going to be Dr. Proctor, who's the president of this board. So that way we can get things done. I don't, it's nothing personal, but, as a culture, we're so relationship oriented, and then it breeds familiarity, and we can't separate our feelings versus what's good for the mission. Because remember, it's not about us. It's about that mission.
Yeah.
So those are the three major things that I see.
Yeah. No doubt.
I hope that makes sense.
Very much so. And I think,
I go on and on. So I'm
trying
to bring it in. Trying to bring it in.
No, you're fine. You're fine. No, I love one of the first things you said is that the people on the board, they have to bring resources to the organization that you just not ought to be thinking about. Can I get you to say yes to everything? Because sometimes you want the board to push back. Sometimes you want them to say, but no, I want you to think about it this way, and this is why. You want that person that has that plug, and you even said it, like for a particular venue or what have you. So I think that really helps people because, and even other piece you said, because I think one of the temptations is to go get cousin and nephew and brother and sister and mom and dad and try to have my board that way. So that was very clear.
And man of God, I understand, if you permit me to say, I understand that it's your baby.
Yep.
And you're starting it from scratch, is your concept that God has given you. But once you make it into a nonprofit, it's about that mission. Yeah. So you have to submit it to the board, because once you step away, it's going to be still about that mission. If the listeners, if my listeners don't hear anything else I'm saying tonight, when you set up this nonprofit, that mission has to be so embedded in you that the people that you bring together have to have that same mind. Yeah. And I have served on numerous boards. I have been in many spaces, and the number one thing that I see with boards is that the ability to move the organization to the next level, because of the feelings and the friendship and the people not showing up, it becomes a big ball of mess.
Yeah.
So if I can encourage you, get some people that think different than you. Get some people that's going to challenge you. Doesn't need to be the whole board. And I understand trust is an issue, but capability, competency, and all that is equally as important as trust. When we're talking, because you got to stop thinking individual and you got to think corporation.
Yeah, that's good. Let's move here, because there are a lot of pastors I'm connected to who are either watching this now or they'll watch this replay. And so I want to hear you talk from your perch about how churches ought to be thinking nonprofit. So there are several churches who have their 501c3 status, and it's connected to their church's name. And I think we actually talked about this before we got live. Should churches be considering developing a separate organization for their community work? How would you talk about that relationship between churches and nonprofit work?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Great topic. I definitely do think that churches should have a 501c3 for the church, so that members can claim their tithes and offering as a tax deduction. And it opens the church up to receive a lot of opportunities because they have that status. I'm just going to keep it there and keep it simple for that piece of it. But I then also think to reach the community in an evangelical or religious capacity, I do think that the church should have a separate 501c3 organization just for its community outreach. And the reason why I'm bringing this up and not putting those community programs under the church is because if you're running a daycare or a school and you're putting that under the church, first of all, the 501c3 that was granted by the church was granted for church purposes, for religious worship, not for a daycare. So that's rule number one.
That's good.
Rule number two is, when you're going after government money and funding and all that, because the church is deemed religious and classified that way on the 501c3 letter, You need a separate 501c3 that's going to speak to the mission of reaching just the community or people that are not inclusive of the church. So, because then it becomes, if you put it under the church, that the church's mission to promote religion is more important than the programs and services you provide. And that may not be the truth, but it can be perceived that way. But if you have a separate 501c3 and you say, hey, we're going to put the daycare under a community development corporation. The community development corporation rents the space from the church. You see the difference?
Yeah.
It's the CDC renting the space from the church. So the CDC now is paying the church to rent that space. And it's no conflict there because they're two separate organizations. And then when you're going after government money or grant money, you won't be associated with the religious arm. You'll just be able to put in for money for the program, if that makes sense. But utilizing the church's space to run the program. And most grant funders will allow that. The third thing I want to say really quickly is, I know I'm going to step on a lot of toes when I say this. Churches should also have a third 501c3, and the third 501c3 should be for the pastor. So I do think that the pastor should have its own separate ministry. Like I have Wesley Proctor Ministries, because there are going to be conferences you may want to host that's independent of the church. There are books, there are messages you may have preached that can all go under your personal ministry. Because remember, the church didn't labor for that. You did.
Yeah.
So, and if you ever stop pastoring, what happens to your ministry? Does your ministry just not go on because you're not pastoring a church? You may want to do some other things after you have pastored, and you want your intellectual property to be connected to your ministry. Like you have TD Jakes Ministries. Right. TD Jakes has his books, his tapes, his messages, his CDs. You go into his church, his whole store is full of his stuff.
Right. Yep.
And those proceeds go to his ministry. So if you ever wanted to walk away from the ministry or retire and do something else, but not leave God and still preach and declare the word of the Lord, you'll have your own ministry to do that.
Yeah, that's good. So, let me ask you a quick question about that. Why should a pastor consider the nonprofit route versus maybe developing a LLC or something in that nature? Can you kind of speak to that?
They could do either.
Okay.
Some pastors do LLC because they don't want to answer to a board. Okay. But then they're subject to corporate income tax.
Gotcha.
Most people go nonprofit because they're subject to that corporate income tax bill. Yeah. And you don't feel like paying that bill every year. And it's just best because you have the benefit of a nonprofit. Because it's religious, it can be educational, it can be charitable, it can be literary, it can be scientific, preventing cruelty to animals or children, or promoting amateur or national sports. So any one of those categories, if it's under your ministry, it fits the 501c3 purposes. So you can overlap in a lot of them, but the main reason why they go nonprofit is because of the tax break.
Yeah.
And I can't blame them.
Right.
Yeah. And then you can I hope I don't you can have a for-profit within a nonprofit. And what do I mean by that? So you can legally form your organization as a for-profit, that is an LLC, for example, and then go after your 501c3 status and be granted it. But you would be subject to what's called unrelated business income tax, which means the IRS would only give you $1,000 threshold to make the for-profit entity of that income that you set up under the LLC to be exempt from corporate tax. Anything over the $1,000, the nonprofit because it has a for-profit arm, would be subject to unrelated business income tax. We call it UBIT, UBIT. So, and you want to be careful because you don't want to bring in so much unrelated business income that it overshadows the nonprofit's income. Because then they may look at it and say, you might need to be a for-profit. So finding that balance is kind of tough because you'll always be under scrutiny for that UBIT.
Yeah, that's good. And I want to stick with the church piece for a second, because I would love to hear your thoughts about how churches should think through. 'Cause, just about every church has a women's ministry, men's ministry, youth ministry. Should churches be considering doing much of that work through a nonprofit, or should they continue it through the church? Like, do you have any thoughts around that?
Oh, great question. So your women's, your men's, your youth department, keep those under the church.
Okay.
But when you start thinking about the community and the members that are not directly connected to the church, like if you want to run a computer class, and you don't just want to have the members of the church, you want to have people in the community. When you want to give away book bags, or you want to help the community in giving away food, all of that should be done under the non-church nonprofit.
Yeah.
Because it really speaks to the community piece of it. But your women's ministry, your men's ministry, I'm not telling you to pull those out and put them under the CDC. No. You keep them right where they are. But when you talk about reaching the community, you talk about doing a job training, you talk about running a daycare. So you're going to have more than just people from the church, I hope, attending, your programs and services. And my platform and my position about it is it creates a witnessing tool for people that don't know the church or who wouldn't ordinarily come to the church as a light for the church to shine. Yeah. So if you have a family in the community that needs food, and your CDC has the archdiocese come to your church building to give out free food, that family will never forget that and may one day start coming to your church.
Right.
So it could really work in your favor. I know at my church, with me being a youth pastor, we still do our youth ministry work the way we normally do it. None of that changes. The women's ministry, the men's ministry. But when we wanted to run a computer class in the community, it went beyond the church and into the community. So we were able to use our CDC 501c3 to get 20 computers donated to us by Drexel University and have them set it up. Yeah. So those kinds of things, you'd be able to leverage, different programs and services that the church, where the world would say it wouldn't fit because it's religious, versus it being just general community stuff. Yeah,
that's good. One more question connected to this. There are a lot of musicians that have had their lives interrupted because churches aren't able to pay in the same way because of the pandemic and whatnot. And I've been having conversations with musicians about how they can begin to think about how to diversify their income, whether it's offering teachings, camps or things of that nature. Would it be beneficial for some of our church musicians to consider organizing it in this way? Are there any benefits for church musicians, whether they want to start schools or what have you? What would you say to that community?
Well, I know one of the things that would help, because I know they have the payment protection plan, the PPP, during the COVID, and it was extended to churches to apply. But I know most churches may have the paperwork piece in order, like they may have the articles of incorporation, their nonprofit status, or whatever is needed. But then when it comes to the payroll and the taxes piece, that's where it falls short. Yeah. So we don't really hire our musicians and stuff, then are not employees. They're independent contractors. Yeah. They get a 1099 versus a W-2. So they're not looked at as being employees. So they don't fit the PPP model when the church is dispersed the loan or the money that you don't have to pay back to use for payroll, because the musicians are not considered employees because the church don't want to be responsible for the taxes, and the musician has the burden of having to pay those taxes on their own.
Right.
So I think that's a major issue with a lot of churches, because they make them fill out the W-9, they give them the check, and then they don't have an independent payroll company or somebody that they're going through to really file their 941s, to make sure the W-2s are done. And then the musician goes to do something and they realize, hey, I'm not even an employee.
Yeah.
And don't really know the difference. And then they're not paying taxes on this money and they're spending it. And then at the end of the year, they done made $50,000 from this church and realize they haven't paid federal, state, or local taxes on that income.
Yeah.
Same thing with the for-profit arm.
Yeah.
You're in the same pickle. And then you don't have no money left. And then the IRS is looking at you like, you need to pay us $10,000. Right. And you like, I don't have it. Yeah. So it's those kinds of things that I think as a church, we need to come up in. And I'm a part of the church. So we definitely need to come up in our paperwork and making sure our documentation is filed. And I'm going to live by this mantra to the day I die. Yeah. We have to stop being so tight. And sometimes you got to pay for peace.
Yeah.
If you don't know, hire ADP. Let them take out the taxes. Pay the extra $100, $200 a month. But at least you know it's done right. Yeah. And oftentimes we don't want to do it because we don't want to spend the extra money. Yeah. But sometimes spending it will preserve a lot of headaches down the road.
Yeah. That's good. Do you have anything for musicians about a way that they can possibly think about protecting themselves? Should they consider going the LLC route? Should they consider developing a nonprofit? In the same way we talked about pastors, any thoughts around that?
So them playing as a musician, they can do it a number of ways. They can do it as an individual, and just get the W-2 or the 1099 as an individual, or they can form an LLC business where the church or the entity where they render the service for would make out the check to their LLC business. And then when they file their return, they'll be able to write off a lot of the expenses that they incur, so their income won't be, so their corporate income tax bracket won't be as high. So in other words, if I made $20,000 from playing at Victory Christian Center on my 1099, if I had a business, it would be reported to my business, and then I can write off the instruments I bought, the clothes that I wore, the transportation I took to get there, because now I'm the full-fledged owner of this business. Yeah. And I'm not only receiving this income, but this income is helping me to do what it is, the service that I'm providing. So setting up as a business would give the musician on the for-profit side more write-off as an individual. If they do the nonprofit, I don't think I would recommend them setting up a nonprofit for them playing as a musician. It would go back to my thing with the pastors and setting up their own personal ministry, because then the board gets to control if Victory Christian Center giving them money for playing all week.
Yeah.
So my attitude and my position is, why should the board get to control that? I did that.
Right.
I know people won't agree with me, but I did that, and it should go to me, which is correct.
Yep.
So you just have to weigh to see which things are nonprofit ideal related or for-profit ideal related. But it's pros and cons in both.
Yeah. Great stuff. You've been very, very liberal with your time, so I'm not going to hold you too much longer.
Oh, no. I can keep going.
Okay, great.
No.
Yeah. I want to ask you this, because we've talked about this a couple times today, even when we first got on, that it's important that we are clear about what we don't know. So there are a lot of people when they want to start the nonprofit, they try to go online and try to fill out the paperwork themselves, or try to watch a YouTube video, or they try to deal with the IRS themselves. Can you talk about that whole mindset of just knowing what you don't know and really trusting people who can get it done for you?
Well, I don't know if anyone has ever read the instructions for the IRS Form 1023 application. So the IRS Form 1023 application is the paperwork, is the application you fill out to get granted the approval for your 501c3.
Yeah.
And I believe it's on the second page at the bottom. It breaks down how much time it's going to take an individual to fill out this form. And the IRS even recommends that if you don't know what you're doing in the instructions, get a professional to do the paperwork, because you can check one wrong box. You can check one wrong box and it can send your application on in a whole nother level playing field, and cause you to answer questions that you didn't necessarily mean, and you have no clue what you're answering. So you have to be really careful. I would recommend getting a professional because I'm big on that. Not just because it's me. You don't even have to go with me. That's fine. But just to save you the time and the headache, because if you check the wrong box, the other part of it is when you submit it, they're going to kick it back and they're going to ask for additional information. And if you don't provide them with what they want, they're going to keep going back and forth with you until you give them what they want. Yeah. So you really have to understand the laws behind it. You have to understand the language. And sometimes you can be so ambitious, you can give them too much information. I had a client who wanted to start a church. I'm just going to use this as an example. Yeah. She had this lease, she had this building she was going to get. And I was like, no, I'm not going to put that in because you don't technically have it yet. She was like, no, Dr. Proctor, I want you to put this in because the deal's going to go through, blah, blah, blah. So, of course, I'm going to serve the client, and I put it in. Don't you know the IRS came back at us and said, well, where's the insurance? We want pictures of the inside of the church, which they never asked. Yeah. Toward a 501c3 application. And do you know she never signed the contract because the deal went bad. So she didn't have the building. Yeah. So then I had to encourage her to go to a community center, get a letter from the community center to say that they'd given her permission to run Bible classes. Yeah. So you got to know what to give versus what not to give. Yeah. So, that's pretty much it. And I would strongly encourage them. If you don't know what to do, it's okay. Because the IRS can be intimidating. I get it. Yep. But I'm the man. I can handle it. Yeah. It's no problem at all. It's nothing they can throw at us that we can't handle. Right. So
yeah, no doubt
absolutely.
About it. Yeah. And I wanna encourage everybody who's on this call. I know people in and out. Some of you will watch this replay. I know Siobhan and several others have had an amazing experience with Dr. Proctor. He's been able to get them done. He's been able to make the process smooth. There hasn't been a whole lot of headache. He was very clear with her. As soon as Siobhan had the first conversation, she had everything that she needed to get started, and really it just takes the headache away. And I think Elder Durfee Wells was on here and he said pay for peace. He put peace in all caps. and so
peace. Pay for it.
Pay for peace. I encourage you to do that. Dr. Proctor, can you give us an idea of how long the process takes when when you have your stuff together and you're ready to start?
So it depends. So with the IRS 1023, well, as of March 31st, they moved both of the applications online. Okay. So you have the easy form and you have the long form. Usually the long form is for individuals who are new. I mean, who are doing things that require a schedule. Okay. So good point. Churches. So if you're forming a church, you would have to fill out a Schedule A. You couldn't do a short form because you're religious. Yeah. If you're starting a school, you would need to do a Schedule D because you need to answer some questions about curriculum, faculty, blah, 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 blah. So that will require that schedule. And then there's the famous Schedule E. Clients have come to me, have their EIN, have their articles of incorporation, say, Dr. Proctor, I just need you to do my 501c3. And I look at the paperwork, and they've had the EIN for like 5-6 years, and they don't realize that the IRS has what's called the 27-month rule. So the 27-month rule, see, this is why you have to know the law.
Yeah.
The 27-month rule is once you get that EIN number online and you say you're going to start a nonprofit, the IRS gives you 27 months from the date they assign you that employer identification number to complete the 501c3 process. If you fail to complete it within that 27-month window, it's okay. You just have to fill out a Schedule E, because they're going to ask you directly on the application, have you been formed legally more than 27 months? And they're going to know by your tax ID number. So they're going to know. So if you check yes, then they're going to redirect you to the Schedule E, and you have to check boxes to explain why you did not file this application within that window. Then the other major part about it is, if you don't, when you do file the Schedule E and they grant you the approval, it's not going to be the approval from 2016. It's going to be the approval from the date you submitted the application. So if you had any donors that gave up until that time, their contribution is legally not tax deductible.
Yeah.
So they're going to approve it based on the date you submitted it, because you lost the flexibility of it being approved from the date you were incorporated. So there's a lot of layers to it. So if you do the long form, you're going to pay $600 and you're going to wait 6 months. If we do the short form, you're going to pay $275, but you're going to wait 90 days or less, and you get the same ruling.
Right. And so when you do the short form, does that mean you pretty much start the process from the beginning? You know, doing your incorporation, your EIN, you need to start that fresh?
Correct.
Okay.
Or you just recently got it and you're not outside of the bound confines of that 27-month rule.
Gotcha.
And they have a checklist that you fill out. They want to know that you don't have assets over a specific amount, or you may not have it within the first 3 years. I'm going to say 50,000 in the first 3 years. But if you do go over that amount, we'll just fill out the appropriate 990 to account for those funds. Okay. Because at the time when you're filing it, you don't know. Right. So everything is projected. So you can't say that you're not. Yeah. But at this moment, when we're filling it out, you don't have it.
Right.
So we have to go by because people will come to me and say, oh, I'm going to get this $150,000 grant. So I don't want to, I'm not going to be able to use this form. And then we submit the long form. They're waiting 6 to 8 months and the funder is waiting, and then they don't get the grant at all.
Right.
So in grant money, you can't depend on. You have to have other streams of revenue for the organization. Yeah. Because grant money can be funny.
Yep. That's great. Yes. So what I heard from you,
I hope that helps.
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. Very clear. And what I heard from you is that you want people to not to try to play with it. You want them to come to you fresh, even if it's one thing to have the dream and have it down on paper, but don't try to do a bunch of programming before they come to you and then try to start. There's a sense in which, like when they come to you, it could start fresh. And the process can move faster.
It's just an ideal on paper.
Yeah.
Like your wife. Your wife had it in her head for many years, but she knew she had to get the paperwork, and she wanted to take it to another level.
Yeah.
So she made my job easy because she already laid out what she had, and all I had to do was fill in the holes. So, we were able to complement each other in terms of, her having her information and her mission statement and her articles of incorporation. We did all of that together. So she trusted me, she trusted the process, and it went very, very smooth. So, and then one other thing I wanted to mention too, some of my clients get an EIN number and it's the wrong classification. So what I mean by the wrong classification, you want to do a nonprofit, but when you did it, you did it as an LLC, and I can look at the letter and just tell how you set it up. And if that's the case, then I have to get the IRS to reclassify you from an LLC to a nonprofit, and then we have to apply for the status, the 501c3 status. But I can't apply for the status unless you have state approval that you're no longer a for-profit and you're a nonprofit. So there's a lot of layers to it. So you have to convert it out of that on the state level and make it into a nonprofit. So, and then the state has to have record of that. And then I can't submit that paperwork until they approve it with your federal filing. And it can be a little complex if you don't know the process.
Yeah, that's good. I want to ask you this
Yes.
question. This is coming in the comment section. Pamela Williams wants to know: Does Dr. Proctor do personal taxes?
I do not.
Okay.
No personal
All right.
taxes.
Okay.
No, just nonprofits.
Gotcha. All right.
Yes. And
Good.
no for-profit taxes. I just do nonprofits.
Great.
Yes.
Great. Yeah, man, this has been amazing. So, what does somebody need to have together if they're starting fresh? They have the idea, they know they want to move, and just so you all know, I'm actually coming to Dr. Proctor to set up something for us at Christ Community. So when I come to you, and we have the idea, we have some idea as far as our board and whatnot. What do we need to have prepared in order for you to get started?
The name of the organization, definitely that. Your mission statement. I would encourage your mission statement to be no more than a couple of sentences, because even when I put it into the IRS system, they have a character limit of 250 characters. And then when we incorporated, let's say in Pennsylvania, for example, they only allow you 2 lines. Okay. And your mission statement shouldn't be long. It should be clear, succinct, and to the point. And then also, I want to hear what you want to do that's not on the paper. Yep. So that way I can look at the mission statement, look at your name, and see if it captures where you want to go. Great example. I had a client today that I met with who are great cooks, and they want to form a nonprofit to help young people learn how to cook and give food away and run workshops and things like that. So they wanted to call it Ribs and Things. But then there were other things that they wanted to do under the nonprofit that wasn't food related. So I had to really peel the onion to get to the core, because if they named it, I think it was like Russo's Ribs and Things. If they named it that, automatically you and I would think food.
Right.
And ribs. So you want to make sure that the name is broad enough that it can encompass, and it gives the organization the flexibility to house initiatives and programs underneath that nonprofit. So you don't want to be so specific that it locks you out, and then you're mad 5 years from now talking about we need to amend this because we need to change the name. You want to have some fun with it, and you want the organization to grow as you and your board grows with it. So we finally agreed on Russo Foundation. So they would put the food under there. They would have a food component. Then they're going to do the culinary classes, the free culinary classes. And then there were some other things that they wanted to do. So I'm glad we were able to talk it through, because they would have made a mistake that could have cost them.
Yeah, that's good.
So just thinking about that. And of course, you got to have some money to come see me.
Right, I know that's right.
So depending on what state you're incorporating in, changes the incorporation price, but there's no cost for the incorporation. For the EIN, because you can get that free. You can go online and get that together. Then we would incorporate you. I know in Pennsylvania, it's $125 to incorporate a nonprofit. Delaware is like $98. New York is $75. Maryland is probably close to $200. So depending on where you incorporate at is going to determine that price. And then the timeline in which you would get that paper approved, depending on the state that you're in. I believe North Carolina is like $60. So just about every state, I pretty much have experience in incorporating in. And then finally, you have the actual 501c3 fee, which would be the $600 or the $275, depending on what you're doing. And I would need to hear you out to know which way to take you. And then my retainer for doing all of your paperwork is $750.
Gotcha. Great.
Yes, but we do it in phases. So all of the money I will not need up front. So, for example, like with a church, if we're doing a church 501c3, it's a little different than a mentoring program because I would need a copy of the pastor's license as a minister. I would need them to give me a document to show that they have an established place of worship, make a lease or deed or something. And then I would need flyers of past programs or services that they've held. I would need their bylaws to show that they have. So it's different depending on the type of 501c3 you're trying to form.
Gotcha.
So if that makes sense.
Very much so. And I think,
and whatever the organization doesn't have, I will, definitely help and assist to make sure they have it.
Yeah. This is great.
I hope it helps.
Very much so. And I think I heard you say the name, the mission statement, money, and then the 501c3. And that is not the church. That's that's somebody that's starting something that has not a church, right?
Right. If they're starting a church or they're starting another type of program, I would just need to hear out, even though they gave me the mission statement, is that the full mission statement, or are there other things in their mind and their heart that they wish to do? So that way we can make sure it's captured on the form. One of the other things I wanted to mention too is about the retainer. So the retainer goes towards the kids that we give book money to each year. The $750 goes to Wesley Proctor Ministries in our book award. So as I'm helping you, you're also helping me. Yeah. So we give out $150 stipends for kids to buy their books to 25 kids, and it's a fall and spring award each year. And they have to use it for books, and we make sure they use it for books because we give it in the form of a Barnes & Noble gift card. Yeah. So we're not just giving them money, and we're not just giving your money away. We're making sure that they're using it for their college curriculum books. And in order for them to get the spring award, they have to prove that A, they're still in school, B, they have to have a certain grade point average, and C, they have to complete a renewal application. So, we have a very streamlined process in getting these funds. They're not just getting them because they're nice and they're cute and they're graduating high school. We also challenge them by asking them to provide us with some information as well. So as you're helping me, as I'm helping you, you're also helping my organization, give out these book awards. And we've been blessed to give out close to 500 students book money for college, fall and spring. And we've probably given out over $100,000 in book money. Yeah. So I'm very, very grateful to all of you and to some of my clients who are listening, and your wife, man of God, for helping us to be able to accomplish that. Yeah. So it's not just like, that's too much. But if you research and you look around, that's a great price.
No doubt about it. Yep.
It's a great price because a lawyer or someone else would add another zero on it, and then they would outsource your work to me.
Yep. No doubt about it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So please come see me, and I'd like to give you my number if you don't have it.
Yes, sir.
It's 215-651-6254. That's area code 215-651-6254. Any questions you may have, any concerns, anything I may have said that you didn't understand, or you just need clarity about something, please feel free. And I hope this is okay, man. I'm just going on and on and on.
No, you are perfectly fine. I was going to ask you for this, so this is great.
Yes. So feel free to call me. That is my personal cell number. I do answer. Mm-hmm. So again, that number is 215-651-6254.
Yes, sir. I got it on the screen, so you all see that the number. And just to make sure we're clear on this, Dr. Proctor, for those who are still on and those who are going to watch this replay, you don't just work in Philadelphia. You've worked all across Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Maryland. You can pretty much handle business across the country,
Any
right?
state,
Yep.
any state, and across any country. California, I'm working with a client now. Working with a client in Nevada, Texas, you name it, the Carolinas, anywhere. Minnesota, I've done a nonprofit in Minnesota. You name it,
Yeah. Yeah.
I've done it.
This is great. This is great. So please, ma'am, please, sir, make sure that you reach out to Dr. Proctor. You hear how knowledgeable he is. You hear how he just blessed us so tremendously. Already asked him earlier. Already got him on the hook because I said we're gonna need to talk to you again. He already said he was willing to come back. So we're excited.
Oh,
To
I'm
have,
in.
yeah,
I'm in.
we're excited to talk to
I'm
you
in, man of
again,
God. I'm
sir.
in.
Yes,
And I
indeed.
hope this blessed your listeners. I
Very
hope I
much so.
said something that blessed them.
Very, very much so. Dr. Proctor, if you don't mind, I always ask people just some quick fire questions. I always like to get to know folk, even more and just get some more information from them. So while the number's still on the screen, write the number down. Dr. Proctor, I just want to ask you just a couple questions. And first of all, somebody want to say hi to you.
Okay.
You see my wife on the screen?
Yes. Hey, woman of God, how you doing?
Yeah, she can't hear you. He said, "How you doing?"
I'm great. How are you?
Bless you. Bless
God bless
you.
you. I
Bless
can't wait until
you.
quarantine is over.
Yes, yes. I was just telling your husband's listeners what a great client you were and how blessed I was that you even entrusted me with your vision. I'm really grateful.
Oh my gosh, you made it so easy. It was such first of all, our first conversation, I think we were on the phone for hours, right? You made it so easy. And I'm thankful for you. I've been telling everybody, I'm sending everybody I know your way.
Oh, bless you, bless you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So
Love
much.
you, my brother.
Love you. And listen, you gotta call me because we gotta do your state sales tax exemption. So we can
Okay.
get that certificate for you. So
Okay.
when you go shopping, you can not pay sales tax.
Oh, cool. All right. Will do.
All
Look
right.
at that,
Love
y'all.
you.
We handling business right on the call. That's what I'm talking about. All right, sir. Doc, answer me these questions, please. If you could have dinner with any three people, dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh, the Obamas.
Mm,
Definitely them. The
yes,
Obamas and Dr. King.
Obama's and Dr. King. That's good. What's the most important thing you've learned in life? What was your life like before you learned it, and what was your life like after you learned it?
Treasure the people, treasure the important people in your life, and don't take them for granted. I think once my brother got murdered, the arguing, him wearing my clothes,
Yeah,
him getting on my nerves didn't matter. I just wanted him back.
my goodness.
And I think that was a major turning point in my life to just value the people in in your life while you have them.
Yeah. Last one. If you could have a conversation with your 18-year-old self, what would you tell the 18-year-old Wesley Proctor?
Ooh. Not to take Wesley so serious.
Hmm.
I think that would be number one. Um, I think I would have did more for me. I
Hmm.
think I gave a lot of myself away to people who I thought appreciated it, but turns out that they were with me for what I have.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and just learning how to my 18-year-old self to know who's for you and who's not. Um, I think that was a painful lesson that I've learned through the years. I don't think I've mastered it,
Yeah.
but I'm still growing.
Yeah.
But I think the last thing is to have more fun and
Hmm.
to travel more. I think because I'm getting ready to hit the second quarter of my life,
Yeah.
I wish I had to travel more. Like now, I'm just like getting out.
Yeah.
So I've been to Israel, been to Jamaica, been to a lot of different countries, but I think I would have vacationed and rested more.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
That's so good. I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm looking forward to talking to you again. You all have the number on the screen, 215-651-6254. Am I right about it?
You're right about it, sir.
Yes, yes, sir. So you all call Doc. I'm going to be reaching out real soon myself. You all heard Siobhan. She is excited, and we are excited about even connecting you with Dr. Proctor so you can make your own dreams come true. So again, Dr. Proctor, thank you again for being with us tonight, sir.
Thank you, man of God, for having me, and thank you, listeners, for taking the time to even hear me. Bless you, and I pray blessings over your businesses and your endeavors. And I wish you nothing but the best.
Yes, indeed. All right, everybody, it's a wrap. I pray God's blessing and favor on your life. We're going to talk to you all real soon. I won't be on again until Sunday for worship. I'll see you all 9:30 for Sunday school, and then we'll see you all at noon for worship. Again, Dr. Proctor, thanks again, and you be blessed, sir.
You be blessed too, sir. Thank you for having me. Have a great evening.
You do the same. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.